What's up guys? Today we're going to be doing the unthinkable, leaving Chill Penguin stage for last. And if you've played Mega Man X before, you know what kind of challenge that's going to be. Chill Penguin's level has the most important, most helpful, and only required power-up in the entire game. Can't move past it even if you wanted to, the dash. I think many would agree that up until finding the dash, that is when some of the difficulty curve is at its steepest. But since the dash isn't something you start out with in the first of the Mega Man X games, all of the levels and Maverick fights are made technically possible, even if it's at base health, no upgrades, and no dashing. There's never a roadblock, so to speak, like a massive gap mid-level that requires the dash or anything like that. You have to be significantly more careful, learn the stages, and really get intimate with these Mavericks and their behaviors. You have to make the most of how you control this much slower and less capable Mega Man. In a lot of areas, it's kind of surreal to see him in his all blues, still dancing around as slow as can be. Anybody that's played some Mega Man knows how challenging they like to make their Robot Masters or Mavericks, and it's made even tougher today as we tackle them with no heart tanks, no sub-tanks, no upgrades, and even no dash. I'm sure there are plenty of dashless stories from fellow Mega Man X players. Let me know yours and who you think is the toughest without the dash. Just a reminder, this gameplay is on original hardware. There's no emulator, no save states, and absolutely no bullshit, just pure Maverick hunting from the soul. To start out the list, the Maverick I saved for last, perhaps to nobody's surprise, Chill Penguin is still the easiest without the dash. Moving at a much slower speed just means relying more on your buster overall, and gunning down enemies with some pretty mild wall jumps, it's not so bad. The longest jump is probably and purposefully the one right before you have to get the dash upgrade. I was thinking a little bit about how much the difficulty might change right after the game makes you receive the dash upgrade and you refuse to use it, but it's not bad at all. In fact, it was kind of fun. The most surprising part was at the end with the snowballs. I thought for sure this would be much more annoying, but I actually got hit less than normal. You might even think Chill Penguin's fight is quite a bit different, but if you already know his behaviors, like sliding in quickly toward you, or shooting those ice chunks, you're bound to stay near a wall and use that to keep you safe. Chill Penguin is also the smallest Maverick, and you can straight up jump over him while he's on the ground. The other Mavericks are way too big for that. Chill Penguin is pretty unanimously regarded as the easiest, and the same is true even without using the unavoidable dash. Next on the list, and not too surprisingly, Storm Eagle's level has its extra risky moments without the dash. It's a learning curve of its own, realizing how much less aggressive and fast you can be on all of these levels when you're used to dashing through them. You have to take more of your time on the platforming. Falling in death pits and going back obviously isn't fun, but fortunately, taking your time and making the jumps count isn't really too terrible. The most challenging part is probably the turrets on each platform ahead, and funny enough, if you wait too long, they'll respawn out of screen. Well, that's stupid. Yeah, it's nothing too wild, keeping it moving on the way to Storm Eagle's plane. And getting into the fight, this is definitely what changed quite a bit. With the dash, it's easy to press in and rack up damage, but when you don't have the dash, it means your shots can't reach your target since he's off screen. And if he keeps pushing you with his wind attacks, you can get pretty close to the edge, and that actually had me pretty nervous. His dive bombing attacks require a tighter window for you to turn around and shoot, but it's still not that bad at all, which is why he was still the first I beat and only the 7th on the list. From here on out, things are actually a lot more interesting and the challenge changes pretty significantly, like actually dying and not doing things on the first try. Flame Mammoth is a really different and honestly cool experience without the dash. Getting to see his stage in its original state without the freeze-over effect from beating Chill Penguin stage first is really neat. There's something very classic about it. Seeing it this way digs out such old nostalgia to the decades ago when you first saw Mega Man X played this way, when it all still felt so big and like a total mystery. Naturally, the fire hazards and lava floor add to the challenge on top of having to move so slowly, making the conveyor belt parts and all these jumps quite a bit different. Fortunately, the damage isn't totally out of hand. It's surprisingly forgiving, and I feel like classic Mega Man on the NES would have handled this all differently, probably with one-hit deaths, and it's not like the fire or lava isn't avoidable either. But it does get a bit more challenging not being able to blow past and jump by everybody. Getting to Flame Mammoth also presents a really big challenge. I mentioned earlier how we could actually jump over Chill Penguin as opposed to everybody else, and here's a great example of that. Flame Mammoth is huge. Fighting him without the dash is quite the experience. So you have the quaking jumps, as you know. Not being able to quickly dash away from his large frame is quite a bit concerning. But the worst parts of the fights were when I was actually falling to fatigue, trying to hold a charge shot up in the corner and sliding down for just a second to quickly jump back up there. I was waiting for him to eventually fire some projectiles or change the direction of the belt that we're fighting on, but no, I was just pinned up into the corner, and he's way too big to jump over, and he did this until I couldn't handle it anymore. So when the same thing started to happen on the next attempt, I was kind of worried, but eventually decided to risk sinking down and trying to go underneath. I was worried about projectiles, but then the unthinkable happened. When he shoots fire, his trunk goes right over Mega Man's head. Unreal. Never would have known that if it weren't for this challenge. Between timing his quaking jumps, being really careful on the wall, and learning you can sometimes stand safely right next to him, Flame Mammoth was the first significant increase in the challenge and 6th on the list. The next 5 are all a much bigger pain. This may come as a shock, but Armored Armadillo came in 5th for me this time. A lot of his stage utilizes this rail car. It really does go for quite a bit of it, so that kind of neutralizes not having a dash for at least a few chunks of the level. You still have to look out between the rail rides, and there is one pretty large gap with spikes, but you don't need the dash to get past it. Enemies like bats are noticeably more annoying since you can't just dash away as you used to, so there's a bit more effort into taking out multiple enemies at a time, but eventually the level ends with the final ride and you just have to be ready to get off for Armored Armadillo. You also have to be mentally ready to face off with the Maverick with the strongest defense, only receiving 1 peg of damage with even your charge shot. Taking on this stubborn fight without the dash is pretty ridiculous. It's honestly insane just how much Dashless affects the next 4 fights in order for this type of challenge to be so low. What I can promise you is that the fight will be long. Mine was over 2 minutes. Yeah, 2 minutes, not for the whole level and fight, just for the fight. It was over 2 minutes long. Keep in mind, Armored Armadillo can kill you in only 3 hits. You have to shoot him 32 times while only getting hit a maximum of twice. You have to look out for his shots, try to pepper your own in at a pace where he won't just deflect them all, because believe me, sometimes he will. Not being able to dash means you need to stick near a wall, and also to be able to anticipate where Armored Armadillo is going when he rolls up and crashes all over the place. When you move this slowly, you've got to be really focused on his bouncing pattern. When he's on the way to hit the opposite corner, you better get out of there. But you can't get caught out in the middle either. Since I was hit twice, I was only 1 hit away from death. And after 2 tense minutes, and I think getting a bit lucky when he decided to stop rolling, I'm extremely glad I did not have to attempt this one again. The top 4 really take the boss fight encounters up a notch, for you and your blue feet. Barely at number 4, Launch Octopus. Not being able to dash really slows things down in the water. With the dash, you can just moonjump across big parts of the level until the few mini-boss encounters. But now, you actually have to shoot things and care about what you're doing, and in some ways, it's honestly kind of cool, slowing down and playing the game this way, with Mega Man in his original form. The submarines had me pretty nervous about this challenge, but you can't underestimate just how much damage you can do with your mashing. The best offense is a good defense a lot of the time. You have to do your best buzzsaw impression and just tear through every second you have, especially with your tiny base life bar. Things get extra tense during the second submarine fight with those instant death spikes. They're just sitting there waiting for you to get pushed or pulled into them. It felt like I was white knuckling through this whole thing, just mashing desperately, hoping for it to be over. Aside from the 2 submarines, you also have this snake dragon mech thing. Not being able to dash away from it makes it significantly tougher to avoid contact damage while getting in your shots. These fights aren't super short either. This went on for a minute, which is significantly longer than the 15 to 20 second submarines. Some enemies that interact quite a bit differently are these big pufferfish that suck in water along with you in it. Usually you could just pull away and pass these currents, but not anymore. It's more funny than anything else since this doesn't actually hurt you. Speaking of hurtin' though, let's check out Launch Octopus. Launch Octopus has a lot of projectiles, but he also spins and pulls you in too. With the dash, it was so easy to use this opportunity to get space, but you have to be more careful since it pulls as hard as you can run. So important to have a charge shot ready between these. And it's tough not being able to dash away quickly before squaring up to fire shots. Being so slow makes it more challenging to get proper spacing for your bullets to blow through his torpedoes, and to also have some room to even attempt avoiding those damn fish. Quite the challenging fight. With those mash-heavy lengthier mini-bosses, I was relieved to clear on life 0 to avoid the game over and trying this all again. Into the top 3 hardest Dashless, just so ridiculous at this point. Spark Mandrill. Spark Mandrill's level isn't so easy with your blue shoes. While you have several enemies in a row that just require mashing, things get the most challenging when you have to play against a tough, big mini-boss. This guy. Talk about a hard stop for any newer or rusty players. This thing takes a lot of shots, and it kills you in only 3 hits. Like, what the heck is that? And losing here, even after all that you've done, puts you at the beginning of the level. What in the world? That's just cruel. I felt super lucky to get through this on my second try, because geez, I would hate to keep repeating the first half of the level, but I was super nervous because I did not want to do it again after a game over. It's a pretty challenging checkpoint to make it through. The second half isn't too terrible, and getting fortunate with health drops goes a long way. It's just moving along with a charge shot ready, and being careful with your jumps, not panicking if you fall too low using the wall climbing. But difficulty sees its highest peak with the terrifying baboon cousin, Spark Mandrill. This dude without the dash is when it starts to feel pretty insane. It's a good thing Mega Man X is so well designed though, because as terrifying and powerful as he is, you have just enough capacity and capability to take him out. When he pounds out those electrical orbs, you have to be ready with a jump, and if you're on the wall, it feels impossible at first, but you realize you actually can get around them. But if you are to try to jump over him, you need to hold that charge shot just in case Spark Mandrill charges your way. That is your answer to his dashing fist. Spark Mandrill is incredibly dangerous and can kill you in only 3 hits. That's a lot of pressure to be under when he and his attacks are so quick. He's a big sprite, not easy at all to get over, and as soon as you do touch down over him, feels like you're on eggshells for a split second. Either the sparks come out in a blink of an eye, or be ready with a shot when he dashes in. Between the annoyance of the first checkpoint and that mini-boss, and actually finishing the deal against this dangerous guy right here, it's why Spark Mandrill is number 3 on the list. Into the top 2 now. The lame thing is, you'll know who number 1 is after I say number 2, but we have to talk about one at a time, and these last 2 are really something else. If you're looking, there are honestly some pretty legendary little Super Nintendo challenges here. Next one we're going to talk about is Sting Chameleon. Sting Chameleon's level has some decent challenge without the dash. I mean, there's plenty of robotic critters to shoot through, and you have to be careful in the rock dropping caves, especially without your helmet. This level actually taught me something else I didn't know. I get that it wouldn't make sense, but I did figure that you needed the dash in order to dash with the mechs, but double tapping still works, even without the dash upgrade. It makes sense you can still do it, but still, it surprised me and felt funny dashing without the dash upgrade. With the mech and its dashing in mind, you could say this level isn't insanely harder without the dash, but Sting Chameleon, on the other hand, is a different story. When I think of a few challenges to make somebody cry, I think taking your blues through Sting Chameleon is a pretty serious one. First of all, he's a tricky and hard fight to begin with. His approaching, while he's camouflaged, can feel pretty impossible to avoid if you make the mistake of hiding toward the wall. But you actually have to occupy his space where he wants to go to bait out his attack early and tightly move out of range. Not being able to dash away while pulling off this kind of movement is really tricky, hanging right in that sweet spot that's close enough to keep him from moving closer, but still enough space to get out of reach from that tongue. I never used the dash to avoid his falling spikes before, so you can still say that's all challenging with base health, but it's not that much different. But where it does hinder you is when you'd like to quickly dash over to the wall in order to climb and get some shots in while you can, as Sting Chameleon throws his 3 tail projectiles. With his level of defense and how often he camouflages, the fights do take a bit of time. The first time I died, the fight was over a minute long, and on the second go around, it was over 90 seconds. Having to be so close to that punishing tongue smack and his solid defense, with some tough windows to attack, plus having to know his behavior inside and out, it's why I had to place Sting Chameleon number 2 on the list. Well, there's only one Maverick left. Who was the Maverick that punished me with a couple of game overs and made me reclimb his tower? None other than Boomer Kuwanger. At this point, I'm quite positive that no other stage is more strongly influenced by being dashless than this right here. Plus, Boomer Kuwanger becomes a gigantic and frustratingly cheap pile. While a lot of these stages of course felt a bit tougher without the dash, none of them all of a sudden felt like chess. And that's what some moments did here, because as we ascend upward in this tower, not being able to dash jump really hurts you. The enemies are so much more dangerous, you need to navigate differently. A couple of moments feel like puzzle platforming design. It's hard getting through everything here, from the damn security section that you can't just jump dash across without really having to think about it, and now the difficult climb from inside the tower to outside past all of those turrets, and back inside, getting by even more bullets and platforms. But Boomer Kuwanger, without the dash, is who I consider the trickiest of all. This may come as a surprise if you've seen my Mega Man X, X2, and X3 Hardest Mavericks list, where dash was used across the entire countdown, because you start with it in X2 and X3. And it turns out Boomer Kuwanger is pretty challenging just with your dash, but you can use your wall dash to easily get over him and evade. But without the dash, in some ways, this started to feel kind of impossible. Strangest detail of all, that again I wouldn't have noticed if it weren't for the challenge, but for whatever reason, even when you shoot him in the face, he somehow falls towards you, and that can be a major problem. This started to make escape feel impossible, and when you're pinned up in the corner, tell me what else it looks like you're supposed to do. You have to escape, right? But we all know Boomer Kuwanger loves to dash in for his throws and contact damage, so you try to use the buster as protection, but you get hit anyway. Taking down this guy required some adjustments. I tried to avoid clinging to the wall right from the beginning, and toyed with stepping toward him while firing, hoping he wouldn't just call my bluff and rush right in. But doing this, taking some chances while pounding the shots, and perhaps getting a little lucky, was able to buy me a lot more damage than normal. Those boomerang throw situations in the corner just suck. It's like you have to get out of there and take some risks in order to have a chance to outlast them. The level is a lot tougher and more frustrating, and Boomer Kuwanger himself is quite ridiculous, where it seriously feels like you need to just gamble and let it fly. Have to make a handful of good calls while somehow not getting hit more than just a few times, even when Boomer Kuwanger sometimes makes it feel impossible. But that's just what I found. I thought it was a really great challenge and helped me appreciate Mega Man X that much more. If you're a huge fan of the game and have the patience for it, maybe try it out, at least on your first or second lives next time you play through. The tense walk on the tightrope that these fights provide without the dash is pretty exhilarating. And getting to see this on your TV is pretty sick. Just so unusual only seeing Chill Penguin's face lit up. It's a good reminder of the layers of difficulty that Mega Man X has to offer. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Would love to hear about your Mega Man stories in the comments. What'd you think of the challenge? Have you done this or something like it before? Appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Countdown, It's Expensive But Is It Good? Or 5 Minute Footlong. And be sure to have a great rest of your day.